She rejected and tormented for being too beautiful until a human did the unthinkable. She was punished her whole life for being too beautiful. But the day they tied her up to destroy her, a human stepped in. And what he did next shattered the entire alien colony. Ayla Varen lay half-conscious on the cracked obsidian ground of Kaelor Ridge, the twin suns burning her silver skin until it shimmered like molten glass. Her wrists, bound behind her with spiked biowire, throbbed violently every time she breathed. The colony dust had already dried on the trails of blood running from her split lip. Her cheek was swollen, her ribs bruised, and her vision trembled between light and darkness. Around her, the violet grasslands whispered with the sound of distant predators. Ayla didn't move. She couldn't. Her legs had collapsed hours ago, long before the Kalori villagers dragged her to the execution post and tied her there like a discarded specimen. All because of her face. Not because she harmed someone, not because she broke a law, but because she carried the rare silver-marked beauty of her species, the kind that awakened jealousy sharper than knives. The Kalori women hated her for being noticed. The Kalori men hated her for not wanting to be. And so Ayla Varen became the easiest target in a world where insecurities ruled stronger than justice. She tried to swallow, but even her throat felt scorched. Her white hair, matted with dust, clung to her cheek. Small insects crawled across her exposed skin, drawn by the faint, sweet scent her species released when injured. She couldn't even lift a hand to brush them away. She had begged for mercy once, but mercy did not exist in Kaelor Ridge. The night before, the accusations had come like fire. Fast, irrational, loud. A woman screamed first, then another. Then the tribal elders declared her a corrupter of men, even though she had never spoken a word to any of them beyond polite greetings. Too beautiful, they whispered. Too dangerous. Too distracting. And when the suns fell, they dragged her to the ridge, tied her to the ancient execution beam, and left her for the morning heat to finish the job. A slow suffering. A silent death. The perfect punishment for a girl whose only crime was existing. Ayla's eyes fluttered open. The horizon blurred in shimmering waves. Somewhere far away, a creature howled. She tried to lift her head, but pain stabbed behind her skull. The biowire tightened around her arms, cutting deeper into her glowing skin. She winced, letting her head rest against the cold surface behind her. "If no one comes, I will die here." Her voice cracked like a broken instrument. No one heard it. No one cared. The Kaelori tribe had made sure of that. Her breathing grew shallow. The suns burned hotter. Her vision turned white. She prepared herself for the last breath, the last flicker of consciousness. Then a shadow broke across the light. A figure, moving, slow, steady, human. Ayla blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the shape. The people of Kaelor rarely saw humans, especially not alone wandering the ridge. Heat hallucinations were common, and for a moment she believed this was one more cruel mirage. But then the silhouette sharpened. Broad shoulders, sun-worn clothes, a breathing mask hooked to his jaw, boots that crushed the brittle obsidian with each step. He walked like a man who'd survived storms. He moved like someone who'd buried friends. He looked like someone who'd seen too much, but refused to look away now. His name was Jackson Hale, a frontier ranger from the human outpost 3 leagues away. But Ayla didn't know him. Didn't know why he would come here. Didn't know why he would stop. She only knew he wasn't from her world. Jackson halted a few steps from her, his eyes narrowing as he took in the wires digging into her skin, the bruises, the exhaustion carved into her every breath. He knelt, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded creature that could shatter with one wrong move. Ayla's lips trembled. No one had ever knelt for her. No one had ever looked at her without judgment. He studied the wires, then her face, then the bruise on her cheek. His voice was low, soft, human. "Who did this to you?" Ayla's breath shook. She tried to speak, but no words came, only a sound of pain. Jackson didn't push her, didn't grab her, didn't react with disgust. He simply waited. And for the first time since she was abandoned at this ridge, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Not hope, not safety, but the beginning of both. Jackson Hale waited until Ella's breathing leveled into something that wasn't pure agony. Then without a word, he reached behind his belt and pulled out a compact plasma blade, the kind frontier rangers used to cut through dense thicket, scrap metal, and occasionally hostile creatures. But when he moved the glowing blade near her bound wrists, Ayala instinctively jerked away. The bio-wire sliced deeper, and she stifled a cry. Immediately, Jackson froze. He didn't touch her, didn't force her, didn't whisper soft lies like her people often did before delivering pain. Instead, he lowered the plasma blade and raised both his hands slowly, showing her empty palms. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "Just tell me yes, and I will cut you free." His voice, low, steady, painfully human, cut deeper into her than any blade. Ayala swallowed. She hadn't heard gentleness in so long. The sound felt foreign, almost dangerous. Her species had heightened emotional senses. Tone mattered more than words. And his tone told the truth. She forced her throat to work. Yes. Jackson didn't waste a second. With controlled precision, he leaned closer and pressed the plasma blade to the biowire. The material hissed and melted, releasing her wrist with a sudden snap. Her arms fell forward, and the blood rushed back through her veins like 1,000 needles. Ayala gasped in pain. Jackson immediately caught her. Not tightly, not possessively, just enough to keep her from collapsing onto the sharp ground. She sagged forward, her white hair falling over his shoulder as she tried to steady her breath. "Easy. I've got you," he murmured. Ayala couldn't remember the last time anyone said that to her. Her knees buckled when she tried to stand. Jackson moved an arm behind her back, supporting almost all her weight as he guided her upright. She felt the heat of his body through her torn clothes. A different kind of heat than the sun's, a living warmth, steady and grounding. She hated how much she needed it. Why would a human be here?" she whispered between breaths. "I patrolled this side of the ridge," he answered. "Saw a heat signature that didn't make sense. Came to check." Ayala laughed weakly, a broken sound. "You shouldn't have." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Seems to me somebody needed help." Need. Help. Words that didn't exist in Kaylor Ridge unless used as weapons. The ground tilted under her as he helped her walk toward the hoversteed, waiting several meters away. An advanced machine shaped like an armored beast, its engines humming low. Its metallic shell reflected the twin suns like molten chrome. Ayala stared at it, her vision still blurry. "I can't ride that." "You don't have to," Jackson said. "You'll sit. I'll do the work." He lifted her carefully, far more carefully than someone trained for combat should be capable of, and settled her onto the cushioned seat. When her head swayed, he placed a steadying hand between her shoulders. "Can you hold on?" "No," she admitted. "Then hold on to me." She flinched. Such closeness was forbidden in her culture unless bonded, but she had no choice. When Jackson mounted the hoversteed in front of her, she placed both trembling hands around his waist. His muscles tensed under her touch for a split second, then relaxed, accepting her weight against his back. The machine lifted off the ground, a graceful hum, then surged forward over the glowing plains. Ayala tightened her grip, not because she feared falling, but because his presence felt like the first anchor she had felt in years. The human outpost came into view after almost an hour, a cluster of domed shelters, metal towers, and shimmering shields humming with protective energy. Compared to the cruelty of Kaylor Ridge, it looked like a sanctuary. Jackson slowed the hoversteed at the perimeter checkpoint. The field parted for him with a whispering pulse of blue light. Several humans glanced at him as he passed, but no one asked questions. Rangers returned with injured beings often enough. Ayala sagged against his back. Where? Where are you taking me? To my place, he answered simply. It's quiet. No one will bother you. She stiffened. You're home? You barely know me. You're hurt, he said. You need safety. I have some to spare. Those weren't the words of a captor or a savior. They were the words of a man who had seen too many people abandoned. When they reached his quarters, a sturdy habitation module reinforced with old steel runes, Jackson dismounted and lifted her again. She should have resisted. She could walk, but she couldn't. Inside, the air was cool, scented faintly of metal, old coffee, and the faint whisper of a past he didn't talk about. The hollow frame of a smiling woman flickered on a table, human, gentle-eyed. Ayala stared at it. Jackson caught her gaze. My wife. She died during the first storms. Ayala lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. He nodded once, nothing more, then motioned toward a recliner seat. Sit. I'll get water. She sank down, every joint screaming. When he returned with a hydropack and a soft towel, he didn't touch her. He simply set them in front of her and stepped back, giving her privacy, giving her control. Nobody in her entire tribe had ever given her that. Ayala cleaned her face, her arms, her trembling hands. With each wipe of the towel, she felt less like a burden and more like a being who still had value. When she looked up, Jackson was leaning against the doorway, arms folded, not watching her, but watching the world outside and as if expecting danger. Why do you care? She finally whispered. He didn't turn. Because someone should have, he said. The words hit her like a pulse of light. Someone should have, but no one ever did, until now. Ayala lowered her gaze, her voice shaking. What happens next? When the people who did this come looking for me? Jackson finally looked at her, his eyes steady, unflinching, human to the core. Then they'll have to go through me, he said, and I don't break easy. For the first time since she was exiled, Ayala felt her heartbeat steady in her chest. Not from fear, but from the terrifying possibility of a future she never believed she'd have. Night came early on the frontier world of Kalor. Its twin moons rose like pale predators, casting long shadows across the outpost walls. Inside Jackson Hale's habitation module, the air hummed softly with the whir of generators and distant security drones gliding overhead. Ayala rested on a cushioned cot near the wall, wrapped in a light thermal blanket. Her skin still held faint bruising, but the tension in her shoulders had eased. She sipped water slowly, her hands steadier than before. Jackson sat across the room, working silently at a small metal desk, adjusting the calibration on his plasma revolver. His expression was calm, but his jaw was locked, a subtle anger simmering beneath her surface. He wasn't angry at Ayala. He was angry at the world she came from. Ayala studied him quietly. Humans were unusual creatures, fiercely protective, deeply loyal, strangely gentle in moments where most species chose dominance. She didn't understand Jackson, but she felt drawn toward the way he carried himself, the way he seemed made of both strength and sorrow. Finally, she spoke. You shouldn't face them alone. Jackson didn't look up. Not planning to. The outpost has security systems. That's not what I meant, Ayala whispered. The Kailori, they don't give up. They believe beauty is a curse if it doesn't belong to them. They will come for me. Jackson slid the revolver into its holster and met her gaze with steady certainty. Then they'll find out I fight harder than they do. The simplicity of the declaration shook her more than any threat could. Ayala lowered her eyes, fingers curling into the blanket. Why? She asked. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. My own people abandoned me. Why risk your life? Jackson's voice softened. Because no one deserves what happened to you, and because I've been on the wrong side of loss before. I'm not letting it happen again. There it was, the shadow in his eyes she had noticed earlier. A kind of grief that lived inside him like an old scar. Your wife, she murmured. He hesitated. She was trapped during one of the early storms. By the time I reached her, it was too late. Ayala exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, truly. He nodded, accepting the sympathy but not dwelling in it. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It felt warm, grounding, the kind of silence that builds, not breaks. Then a sharp alarm blinked across the window interface. Ayala jolted upright. What? Jackson was already on his feet, checking the perimeter scan. The monitor showed a dust trail forming on the horizon, several heat signatures. Fast-moving, coordinated. Jackson cursed under his breath. They've come early. Ayala's pulse quickened. That many? Already? 5. No, 6 riders, Jackson said, tightening his gloves. Armed and determined. Her breath shook. They won't stop. They'll claim I belong to them. They'll claim I spread shame. Jackson stepped closer, his presence steady as stone. You don't belong to anyone, and they're not getting within 100 meters of you. But Ayala grabbed his arm, her fingers trembling. Jackson, they don't fight cleanly. They strike in numbers. They use pain as a weapon. You don't understand. My people don't just want me back. They want to make an example of you. And they will fail, Jackson said simply. Before she could respond, the scanners beeped again, this time louder. Impact warning. Approaching hostiles within 300 meters. Jackson motioned her toward the far side of the room. Stay low. Stay here. Ayala shook her head violently. No, I won't hide while you face them. I won't let someone defend me while I cower. He paused, studying her. Her eyes, luminous and faintly silver, burned with determination. You're brave, he said. Braver than they ever believed. I'm tired of being punished for existing, she said. If I'm to live, I will fight for it. Jackson weighed her words for a moment, then nodded once, respectfully. Then stay close, do exactly as I say, and don't break cover. He grabbed his combat vest, slung the plasma revolver across his hip, and retrieved a compact pulse shield. Ayala followed, her breath steady now, her fear replaced by something sharper. Outside, the rumbling engines grew louder. The Kailori riders approaching on biomechanical beasts made from bone, metal, and fury. Their silhouettes flickered in the distance like living nightmares. Ayala's heart thudded painfully. She recognized the lead rider, the tribe's preacher equivalent, a man whose voice could turn a crowd into a weapon. Jackson opened the door and stepped out into the hard ground, the night air humming with tension. Ayala stood behind him, half hidden but unbroken. The Kailori riders slowed their beasts, stopping several meters from the outpost's boundary. The preacher raised his chin with that familiar arrogance. Human, he shouted, you shelter what is ours. Jackson stepped forward. She's not yours. She carries a forbidden beauty, the preacher hissed. She is a danger, a corrupter. Deliver her now. No. The single word cut through the night like a blade. Another rider spat. Why protect a thing like her? What use is she to a man of your kind? Ayala flinched at the word thing, but Jackson didn't let it stand. Her name is Ayla Varen, he said, and you don't lay a finger on her. The preacher's eyes narrowed. Do you stand against our judgment, human? Jackson's voice dropped into a lethal calm. I stand against cruelty, and if you take one more step toward this outpost, you're not leaving. The Kailori riders exchanged uneasy glances. Humans were unpredictable, rangers even more so, and Jackson Hale's posture radiated a willingness to burn the sky itself if necessary. Still, the preacher sneered. You threaten us, 6 warriors of Kailor Ridge? Jackson rested a hand on his revolver. I don't threaten, he said. I promise. For a heartbeat, the night held its breath. Ayala felt something bloom inside her, something fierce, something fragile, something terrifyingly close to admiration. Jackson Hale was willing to stand alone against an entire tribe. For her, not because she was beautiful, not because she was useful, but because she deserved better. The Kailori preacher pointed his blade staff toward the outpost. Then you have chosen war, human. Jackson didn't blink. Then let's begin. The first strike did not come from a weapon. It came from a scream, raw, furious, alien, echoing across the barren outpost ground. One of the Kalori riders lunged forward, his biomechanical beast leaping like a shadow forged from bone. Its fanged jaw opened, dripping acidic saliva that sizzled where it fell. Ayala's pulse turned ice. Jackson's hand moved faster than thought. The Ranger's plasma revolver snapped from its holster, glowing cobalt along the barrel as a bolt of crackling energy exploded outward. The shot hit the beast's shoulder joint, sending it tumbling sideways with a howl of rage. But the Kalori rider didn't stop. He vaulted off the dying machine and charged on foot, swinging a blade staff that hummed with electric venom. Ayala gasped, "Jackson!" But Jackson was already moving. His pulse shield activated with a thunderous crack. An invisible barrier blossomed between them and the attacker. The blade staff slammed into the shield, sparks flying like blue lightning. The impact hurled dust into the air, creating a glowing cyclone around them. Jackson shouted over the roar, "Ayala, back!" But she didn't run. She grabbed a fallen metal bar from the ground and positioned herself near the doorway. If they broke through, she would not be useless. Not again. The preacher dismounted next, his dark robes flowing as he stepped forward, his gaze venomous. "You protect a cursed one, human, a beauty born to corrupt." Jackson's shield flared again as two more riders attacked, one from the left with twin daggers, the other from the right with a hooked spear. The blows collided with the shield in rapid succession, rattling Jackson's bones. "Her beauty isn't a curse," he growled. "Your hatred is." He shifted the shield's energy, dropping low to blast a shockwave outward. The pulse knocked both attackers backward, sending them skidding across the dirt. Ayala watched in breathless awe. Humans were supposed to be fragile, soft, weak compared to Kalori warriors. But Jackson Hale fought like a storm, trying to tear the world apart. Two more riders circled, swinging bola chains meant to trap prey. Jackson holstered his revolver and reached behind his back, pulling out two compact shock emitters. With effortless motion, he flung one at each rider. The devices attached to their armor crack. A surge of white-blue electricity pulsed through them, and both riders screamed as they dropped to the ground, twitching. Only the preacher stood tall now. He stared at Jackson, his jaw convulsing with rage. "You dare meddle in our judgment?" "I dare," Jackson said simply, stepping between Ayala and the threat. "And I'll do worse if you take another step." The preacher's eyes flicked to Ayala, who was gripping the metal bar so tightly her knuckles glowed. "There she is," he sneered, "the silver-marked blasphemy. The girl too perfect to be ignored. She divides men. She poisons minds. She is a danger to—" "Enough!" Ayala shouted, her voice trembling but powerful. The preacher froze, startled not by the interruption, but by the authority in her tone. Ayala stepped forward, breath shaking, but her stance firm. "I am not a danger. I am not a blasphemy. I am not a curse." Her voice cracked like lightning. "I am alive. I matter. And I choose where I belong." The preacher bared his teeth. "You belong to us." "No," Ayala whispered, "I do not." Jackson saw movement in the preacher's hand. A blade, thin, curved, coated with neurotoxin, slid from his sleeve. "Jackson, look out!" Ayala screamed. The preacher struck, fast, deadly, precise. But Jackson moved faster. He grabbed the preacher's wrist mid-swing, twisting hard enough to force the blade to drop. With his other hand, Jackson slammed the preacher backward into the dirt. The old alien coughed, dazed. But Jackson didn't kill him. He didn't have to. Instead, he stepped back, revolver raised, not to the preacher, but to the sky. A single plasma shot fired upward. The bolt burst in the air like a small star. Within seconds, the outpost's internal defense systems, activated towers unfolding, turrets locking on, drones circling overhead like metallic vultures. Jackson's voice boomed across the ridge. This outpost is under the protection of the United Human Front. Any attack on it is an act of war. Ayala felt her breath stop. The Kalori riders, those still conscious, froze in fear. Humans were few in number, but their technology was unmatched. Their alliances stretched across systems, and no tribe wanted to provoke them. Ah, the preacher spat dust from his mouth, glaring up at Jackson. You risk your people for her? A girl barely worth saving? Jackson stepped closer. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. She was worth saving the moment she was thrown away. Then he pointed the revolver not at the preacher, but at the remaining beasts and weapons scattered on the ground. Leave, he growled. Leave and never come near her again. The preacher hesitated, pride battling instinct. But instinct won. Slowly, painfully, he rose to his feet and signaled to his riders. The defeated warriors limped, staggered, or crawled back to their biomechanical beasts. Engines sputtered, wings unfolded, claws clicked. Within moments they were retreating across the plains, swallowed by the violet grass. Ayala's knees weakened. It was over. For now. Jackson holstered his revolver and let out a long breath he'd been holding. Ayala stepped toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. You faced 6 warriors alone. I didn't, Jackson said without looking at her. You stood with me. Her breath caught. He hadn't seen her as a burden. He had seen her as a partner. The realization struck her harder than any blow. She moved closer, her trembling fingers brushing his arm. You could have died. Jackson finally met her eyes. And if I had, at least it would have been for something that mattered. Ayala's heart thudded painfully, beautifully. Something inside her, something long buried under years of shame and fear, unfolded like a blooming star. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it, the terrifying, breathtaking beginning. Silence settled over the outpost like a soft blanket after the storm. The dust from the battle still drifted in the air, glowing under the twin moons like falling embers. Ayala stood just a few steps from Jackson, her breathing uneven, her palms still shaking from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Jackson wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. He was bruised, dusty, and exhausted, yet he still scanned the horizon for threats, ever the ranger, ever the protector. Are you hurt? Ayala asked. Jackson turned toward her. The moonlight brushed over his face, highlighting the lines carved by years of loss and survival. I've had worse, he said softly. What about you? Ayala exhaled, touching the faint bruise on her cheek. Nothing I can't endure. Their eyes met for a moment, then it held far more weight than words. Ayala could feel it. This man hadn't just saved her. He had shifted the very path of her life. And he didn't even seem aware of the impact he carried. Jackson finally motioned back toward the habitation module. Come on, you need rest. She followed, though her steps were slow and heavy. When they reached the doorway, Ayala hesitated, looking back at the plains where the Kalori had disappeared. Do you think they'll return? She asked. Jackson paused beside her. Not tonight. They underestimated you, underestimated me, and now they know what we're willing to do. Ayala's voice trembled. But they'll hate me more now, because I stood up to them. Jackson gave her a long, quiet look. Hate is something weak people cling to when they fear what they don't understand, he said. You didn't give them a reason to hate you. They created one. Ayala swallowed, her eyes lowering. Then what do I do now? He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. You start over. She stepped inside. The soft hum of the generators felt strangely comforting. Jackson followed, closing the heavy steel door behind them. Ayala sank onto the cot, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Jackson grabbed a medical kit from a drawer and knelt in front of her. Let me look at those cuts. Ayala stiffened. You don't have to. I know, he said, but I want to make sure the biowire didn't leave toxins. She hesitated, then extended her arm. His touch was careful, steady. He cleaned the wounds with a medicated gel that glowed faintly as it worked. She watched him work, studying the concentration in his eyes, the quiet patience in his movements. "You're very gentle, for a warrior," she said softly. Jackson smirked. Rangers learn two things early: how to end a fight and how to patch someone up after one. Ayala's lips curved. "I'm glad you learned both." He paused and then looked up at her. "I'm glad you're still here to say that." Something warm flickered between them, something fragile yet unmistakable. Ayala lowered her gaze. "Jackson, earlier when the preacher accused me, were you afraid of them?" "Afraid?" Jackson shook his head. "No, I was afraid of losing you." Ayala's breath caught. He rose and sat beside her, close, but not too close. "People like them," he said quietly, "they break anything that shines, anything different, anything they can't control. I've seen it on other worlds too. You were born with a beauty they couldn't own. So they tried to destroy it." Ayala's voice was raw. "I never wanted attention. I only wanted peace. And that's exactly what you deserve." Her eyes glimmered, reflecting the soft lights in the room. "Do you really believe I'm not cursed?" Jackson frowned. "Cursed? Ayala, your face wasn't the problem. Their hearts were." Her breath trembled. Years of shame cracked inside her like brittle glass. "Then, what do you see when you look at me?" she whispered. Jackson hesitated for the first time since she met him. "I see someone who survived cruelty meant to break her," he said. "I see someone who fought her own people's hatred alone. I see someone braver than anyone gives her credit for." He exhaled slowly. "And yes, I see someone beautiful, but not the way they claimed. Not the kind that destroys. The kind that endures." Ayala felt tears sting her eyes, not from pain, but from a kind of relief she'd never dared to imagine. "Nobody has ever said that to me," she whispered. "Then they were blind." Ayala laughed, soft, shaky, surprised. Jackson smiled faintly, the sight warming her in a way she didn't understand yet. After a moment, Ayala's expression turned serious. "What if they come back stronger? What if they bring more warriors? I don't want to be the reason your outpost is attacked." Jackson leaned back in his seat. "Then we'll prepare. Humans are good at building defenses, better than Kalori tribes can match." Ayala studied him. "You say we, not you, not I." Jackson met her gaze without flinching. "Because you're not alone anymore." Ayala felt something shift inside her, like the universe opening a door she'd never known existed. "Then tell me," she said softly, "what does starting over look like?" Jackson thought for a moment. "It looks like safety," he said. "It looks like healing one day at a time. It looks like figuring out what you want, not what you've been told to want." "And you?" she asked. "Where do you fit in that new beginning?" Jackson inhaled deeply. "If you'll allow it, I'll stand with you. I'll teach you to defend yourself, to walk without fear, to live without shame." Her heartbeat fluttered. "Why?" He gave her the gentlest answer he had. "Because your life matters," he said, "and I want to see what it becomes." Ayala's breath shuddered in her chest. No one had ever wanted anything for her, not even she herself. And now this man, this human, wanted to stand beside her. Maybe not forever, maybe only for now. But it was the first time she didn't face tomorrow alone. Ayala touched his hand, tentative, careful. He didn't pull away. He turned his palm upward, accepting hers. And for the first time in her life, Ayala felt something new bloom inside her. Not fear, not shame, not pain. If this story touched your heart even a little, make sure to hit the like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you enjoy cinematic HFY sci-fi romance tales like this, subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Now tell me in the comments, would you have stood up for someone like Ayala, even if the whole world stood against you?